And is there, like, because I don't know anything about farming, so I just want to put this in context with people just like me that just shop and I look at organic meat. I'm like, okay, I'm buying organic meat because I feel like it's more or it's safer or it's better for me than regular meat.
Mhm.
But can you tell me what the life cycle of the cattle is? Is there a big difference between getting them fat versus them just being fat or growing in a normal way? Is there a significant difference in the life cycle?
Absolutely. So cows evolved eating pastures, and they're a ruminant. So it plays a really interesting role in the ecosystem because they can eat very low value, high fiber foods in abundance, and they can turn those into very high quality protein. So that's things like grass, right? You or I, were we to eat grass, we would die within probably 2 weeks, right? Just like
Right. Yeah. Huh.
we're called a monogastric, which means mono, one gastric stomach. We have one stomach. Cows are ruminants. They have 5 stomachs. And the reason they have 5 stomachs is that there's various sort of stages of processing needed to take this extremely low value food of grass and turn it into high quality meat and energy for that animal. So they're very, very tuned into a very specific diet. Now, just like us, cows will, if they're given a very carbohydrate dense diet, get inflamed and gain weight quickly. So the modern agricultural system has just done that for cows. They've put them on a grain, corn, and soy intense diet. And by doing so, they, in a very traditional agricultural system, cows would be eaten after like between 6 and 12 years. In a system like Belcampo's, it's 30 months, 26 to 30 months. Then that's actually government regulations because of you can't take cows above a certain age in the US and slaughter them a certain way. And in confinement agriculture, they reach that full weight in 16 months typically.
So, I mean, by 50%, holy cow.
So think about it. In America, the average age of puberty for girls in the past 2 decades has dropped from age 13 to age 9.
Right.
Okay. And in our cows, we did the same thing. So when we say that they are fat at 16 months or they're fully adult, it means they go through puberty a couple months earlier as well. So we have the similar thing. It's like when you give animals this really high carbohydrate intense inflamed diet, there's 2 things that are happening. One is like they gain a lot of weight. There's a sense of abundance of resources, and it's also inflammatory. And that's a signifier of like potential death too. Part of like, this is kind of a crazy thing, but in chickens, the way that they increase egg production is a process called forced molting. And forced molting is effectively cycles of like feast and famine, and the starvation cycle, they push out eggs because when animals are super sick or, in unhealth or in broad patterns of unhealth, they actually briefly will become more fertile. So this structure of like feeding cows, basically human feed, and putting on this really inflammatory diet. If you cut open the stomach of a cow on grain, it's black and shiny. And it's so unappealing. And it's incredible. It's like a thick animal. If you cut open the stomach of a Belcampo cow, it's grassy and it smells like compost. The crazy thing too is people come up to our farm and they're like, how am I on a cow farm? This place smells amazing. They're sleeping outside in tents and there's like zero feeling of like discomfort. It doesn't smell bad. It's one of the, like, it feels like you're in nature. And they're like, how are there 3,000 beef here? This doesn't make any sense. And it's like, well, also animals on a natural diet don't smell as bad, first off. I think we all know that from our own selves. Like even the way, if you're eating poorly, your whole body changes, right? And the way you smell changes. And in like same thing as when you're under stress, right? There's all these changes. But cows manure when they're eating, this really high fiber diet, doesn't smell very bad. And they're also not dense, right? Mm-hmm. So that total smell of death around like what we drive by on the I-5 in near Bakersfield of Harris Ranch, that isn't anything like our farm. All that slick black manure and everything. Our manure is like brown and full of sprouts and seeds and stuff. It's a very different animal. So you basically, it's like to make a cow into an American cow, you take it's as if you're taking a person and saying, you're just going to eat Fritos.
And the standard American diet, the SAD diet.
Yeah. And you put them on this very high omega-6, so lots of seed fat, lots of, like, whereas in the reason that grass-fed beef is healthier for our bodies is that, and this is something that we test regularly at our company, it has a 1-to-1 or a 1-to-2 omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. And a 1-to-1 ratio is actually the key ratio for health. And in the American diet, available omega-3 to 6 ratio is 1-to-30. So
it's a big difference.
Yeah. And, you can correct it in some ways, right? And so the question that you might have is like, well, I could just eat, fish oil and get my omega-3s. But the ratio of the two is actually important. It's not about absolutes, like getting a certain number of omega-3s. I take fish oils, it's great. But it's more important to actually avoid omega-6s as opposed to an absolute achievement of omega-3s. So you're really, the decks is stacked against you, right? And so the problem with our beef is that we've made our beef and lamb to some degree into something that's actually toxic for our bodies, because we've created a product. I mean, I've tested this in my competitor's product that is a 1-to-20 to 1-to-30 omega-3 to 6 ratio. So it's not a ratio that supports good health. And it's actually a ratio that supports inflammation. And I think oftentimes people are like, oh yeah, meat makes me sick, or I have a sore stomach when I eat meat, or I have meat hangovers. Like, yeah, it's because you're inflamed, because it's an inflammatory product when it's made commercially, the way that we make it in the US.